Are we on? We're getting new mics.
Yep.
We're on, thank you. Good evening, welcome to the Hanover Selectboard meeting of January 23rd, 2023, here in downtown Hanover. We're here tonight to have some fun and do good work for the town. As always, the first order of business is public comment. Let me read to you the public comment guidelines. It is our practice to provide an opportunity for public comment at the start of each meeting. Comments or questions should be directed to me as chair and are limited to 5 minutes so we can keep the meeting flowing. If your comment is on an agenda item, please hold it until the agenda item is taken up. Responses, if any, will be provided at my discretion. Please come to the microphone and state your name and address before you speak. Is there anyone here for public comment? All right.
Good evening. I'm Mari Asmussen, the chair of the Hanover Finance Committee, and Kim Hartman is with me tonight. She is our member from the school board. I wanted to brief everybody on our recent activities, which is to say that we voted unanimously to support both the Hanover School District budget and the Dresden School District budget. And we also voted unanimously in favor of all other warrant articles with the exception of one. The thing that I really wanted to stress tonight for you, and that I think Kim would agree, is that the people who go to the ballots that first Tuesday in March need to keep in mind that when you look at the budget increase, that the portion of it that is due to increases in actual educational operational spending, that part of the tax rate is going up by 3.2%. Overall, the tax rate is going up by 6.7%. So the remaining 3.5% is due to uncontrollable, loss of one-time revenue funds from the state. And also importantly, the swing in the Dresden assessment based on enrollment to Hanover. That's added almost $500,000 to the Hanover assessment. So again, the bottom line is educational operational expenses are driving a 3.2% increase in the tax rate. These uncontrollables are 3.5%. The one key thing is everybody needs to vote yes on Article 7. There is an offset of $381,000 in that warrant article because the school board has decided that it's prudent to close the 6th grade tuition reserve fund. If that were to be voted down for some reason, that money would not be returned to the taxpayers and the tax rate would be higher yet again by another 1.3%. or 7.9% overall. So again, the Hanover Finance Committee supported unanimously both budgets, and people need to understand that there were just some uncontrollable factors that are causing this unusually high amount, and we need to vote yes also on Article 7 so that we get those offsets. I don't know, Kim, if you had anything else you wanted to highlight?
Sure, I just wanted to highlight too, yes, it is typically unusually high, right, for what we would normally see, but inflation hasn't been what we've normally seen over the last 40 years. So, still, this budget is still delivering below inflation from what we're seeing. So we're really proud that we're able to do that, considering literally half of the budget was completely uncontrollable due to these aren't even what we might consider uncontrollable due to fixed union contracts that are long term that we really can't renegotiate. That's not even including that, right? So that 3.2% includes those fixed contracts that we have. So just wanted to say that hopefully we'll see everyone out on March 7th to vote in favor of our budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Or any questions? One question. Is this a contract year for the school?
Yes, for one, it is a service staff. So we have 3 union contracts. The service staff is our smallest kind of employees covered. It's only for custodial and maintenance staff essentially.
So the majority of your staffing was covered under existing contracts?
Yes, which were both approved. So the support staff contract and our teachers contract were approved last year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others for public comment? Hearing none. I recommend you set a public hearing. I move to set a public hearing on Monday, February 6, 2023 to accept unanticipated funds from the State of New Hampshire in the amount of $140,244.37, representing an increase in the rooms and meals revenue.
I'll second that motion.
Alex, you want to see this one up a little bit? It's pretty straightforward.
Pretty straightforward. This is a return of money from the state. I did include a memo, which I think may have not been in the original packet, but I did just email to everybody, and we're going to post on the website too, which is just a few different snippets from the New Hampshire Municipal Association with some additional kind of background about the legislative changes at the state level that contributed to both of the NHRS refund and the Meals and Rooms refund. So it's nothing on our end. The state just sends us the check, and we're happy when it's higher than we thought.
Okay, so we need to set a public hearing for February 6th. It's been moved and seconded. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
We have a public hearing on February 6th. I now need to open a public hearing and move to accept unanticipated funds from the InvestNH New Hampshire Municipal Planning and Zoning Grant Program in the amount of $75,000 and to authorize the town manager to execute all such documents.
Second.
Wow, well done. Tell us more about this one.
Yeah, so this is a cool grant that our planning and zoning office applied for. Obviously, awarded $75,000 here. I mean, basically what this enables us to do is sort of a large public engagement campaign to get feedback about zoning ordinances, about our zoning ordinance, and to engage people about affordable housing and the need for affordable housing and how it can be integrated into the community, in a way that's in line with our community's, existing kind of values. And so this is part one that could be a larger grant. There could be an additional phase beyond this as well. It's not a matching grant. So, ultimately a lot of the work within this could end up feeding back into a rewrite of our zoning ordinance, which is something that we've talked about before, and this will help fund a lot of the planning work.
Excellent. Well done. Questions, board? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Public.
Any public interest in this? This is a public, you're right, this is a public hearing. Let's have the public. Sorry. My apologies. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, so Kari Asmus, and I have to say thank you for having so many of these hearings on unanticipated funds. I think that it helps everybody keep track of everything. And one of the things that I have always assumed that I knew the answer to, but assumptions are dangerous things, is that when we accept a grant like this, does that mean that we are actually having the authority to raise our spending authority over what town meeting granted last year, and that something like the rooms and meals tax or the return from the retirement fund that we'll see later, am I understanding correctly that that would more be something that could offset other revenues that don't perform as we expect, or if they do, that then it would go to undesignated fund? I'm sort of wondering how do these monies affect our overall budget, and does it vary by the type of funds that they are? And again, I've always assumed I knew the answer, but I don't know. I might be wrong.
Well, I'm going to take a book out of your book, a page out of your book, Kari, and not try to give you the right answer without being 100% sure. So perhaps maybe Ellen and I can discuss, and unless I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
can definitely let you know.
Any other public comment on this public hearing? Hearing none, board. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? We have accepted the $75,000, and I close that public hearing. And I open another one. I open a public hearing and I move to accept unanticipated funds from the State of New Hampshire in the amount of $81,384.71, representing FY22 employer contribution reimbursements for the New Hampshire Retirement System.
So second.
Second. Any comments on this one, Alex?
This is just another legislative change at the state level. In the memo that I had just circulated, this was from House Bill 1221. This is a one-time payment back, which the meals and rooms we should probably think about the same way, because we don't know what that revenue is going to be in the fall. Even though we get it every year, we don't know, what that amount is going to be exactly every year. And that's it. There's a little bit more information in the memo that will be posted on the website tomorrow too, if folks want. They're both statements from the New Hampshire Municipal Association.
In the 60,000 foot perspective, this is employer money that the state decided they did not need to meet their obligations to their retirement fund. So it's
That's
coming
my
back to the towns.
understanding.
Yeah, okay. Any public input on this hearing? Hearing? Bill?
I just don't understand, but I'll accept that the state legislature made a decision, because every other year we have to put in extra money beyond our norm, and they could have kept this money and just invested it, but we get it back, but then the next time we have to make a payment, it's going to be higher unless they had kept this. So we have no control over this, but I just make an observation that it doesn't quite make sense to me, but I'll vote to support it and accept it.
It sounds like you're interested in predictability and consistency.
Yeah, well, that's a concept that I used to deal with when I was employed, but we'll just make the observation and move on.
Okay. Did we vote on this one?
No.
You ready to vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have gratefully thank the state of New Hampshire for $81,000. Maybe.
I don't know.
We
Reimbursement.
gave it to the state.
Yeah, we
Let's-
got, yeah.
Let's be clear,
It's our own
it's
money.
all of our money.
I'm closing that public hearing. And I'm opening another public hearing, and I move to accept unanticipated funds from Revision Energy, Inc. in the amount of $6,655, representing 1% of their receipts for the Solarize campaign.
I'll second the motion to accept.
I don't have a ton more information about this other than this is just the 1% back from the Solarize. I think this is from the last Solarize campaign.
It was. I think my memory is they agreed to give back to the town 1% of whatever revenues they received from that venture. And I think there is some limitations on this to be used for, I think it was written up in the.
It goes into affordable housing, renewable energy for affordable housing.
Renewable
It's a reserve
energy.
Fund.
Okay.
It's a reserve fund that we've set up, right?
Yep, I assume we
So
will
the
set it
money
up.
goes, that 1% goes into, so should we have a affordable housing project, that money is there to help offset the costs of making it.
That is helpful to know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There are some restrictions on that. Okay, any other questions or public comment on that? Public input? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Accepted the 6655. I'm closing that public hearing, and I'm opening another public hearing. And I move to amend the rates and fee schedule regarding City of Lebanon landfill punch cards to increase to $20 per card.
From 15.
Right?
There was
It was at
affordable
15.
15, they raised their rates and
They did.
So second.
At Lebanon raised their rates from $15 to $20. So we need to change our rates and fee schedule to accommodate that change.
And this is at cost to us. It's not an administrative fee on top, right?
I mean, we're so blessed with that landfill. I mean, the town of Lebanon does a great job. It's open to many, many municipalities, including our own. I think the last time I saw it was a count of like 30 municipalities take advantage of that landfill. They manage it very professionally. Somehow they magically extended the life of that landfill. We were worried that it was like a 15, 20-year life, and now it's looking like it's significantly more. They just do a great job, and we're the beneficiaries of that, and this is just a part of our reimbursing them for the costs that our citizens take.
And they have just added an opportunity for households to compost.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Really well run.
Very well run.
Place. Okay. Any board? Any questions about 15 to 20? Any public input on 15 to 20? Going once, going twice. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. I close that public hearing. Oh, this is more straightforward. I think we're done with our public hearings, unless I'm wrong. Have I missed any?
I think that's it.
Okay. So the next order of business is I move that we approve the Copier leases for the Hanover Police Department and Howe Library, and to authorize the town manager to execute all necessary documents.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so this is part of the last year's budget. We have all the lease documents, which are standard for what we now do, so there's nothing unusual here. Just we're needing to authorize Alex to sign those documents. Board, any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
It is approved. Next order of business is the request to review and approve an abatement on water charges. We had one home in town where the meter went awry, and they experienced a significantly higher bill.
$1,577
Yes.
water bill.
Yes. So this is just to correct that, and that meter will be replaced soon.
It was, right?
It was.
Oh, it was replaced already?
I think it was replaced last week or
Okay.
something.
So I think it's just a matter of this board approving that abatement. Any questions?
I move that we approve the abatement of $1,577 for this water bill.
Questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
We have approved the abatement. Oh, now we get to the fun stuff. Next order of business is the initial discussion of the 2023-24 tax rate target and budget. Alex, you're on.
So my plan is to kind of run through what I had outlined in the memo that I circulated, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Sure.
Okay. And so that memo also, I sent it to the Finance Committee, and that will be posted on the website tomorrow morning. But we'll kind of run through everything right now. I'm not going to read it word for word, but I'm happy to answer any questions if I breeze through anything a little too quickly. And so I'll sort of skip over the first page a little bit in some of the detail, which is just the timeline of kind of what we've covered so far and where we're at this point, and just the next steps in the budget process leading up to town meeting. And so the approach to this year's budget, we had set and discussed some goals in a select board meeting, what seems like ages ago now, in this sort of late summer, early fall, with some initial goals of things that we wanted to look at in this budget year and maybe change in this budget year. Some of that has gotten scaled back a little bit. There's been kind of three main pressures that have sort of demanded our focus, over the last few months. So one is internally sort of getting caught up and reorganized in a couple different kind of finance and accounting areas where we did fall a little bit behind due to staffing shortages and a little bit of a lack of institutional memory kind of on the finance side internally. And so we wanted to make sure that we, this is basically all the stuff that leads into the audit, and making sure that we have accurate numbers that we can base the budget off of, that we get through the audit. This is a year with a new auditing firm, and so they had a lot more questions, which tends to come up when you switch, which is good because it makes us sort of look at our processes. So I wanted to make sure we had all good, credible numbers going into the process, which definitely took a little bit of a lift. The next piece is that the select board committed to beginning the first of a multi-phase review of our employment, wage, and compensation policies to ensure that we're paying our staff fair, competitive market values. So we've communicated to our collective bargaining units and all of our staff at this point that we've given updates on a salary study, we've been calling it, and that we did not get at this point what we needed out of that study to be able to inform the recommendations and decisions that we were going to make about our wages and compensation. And so we still have some more work that we need to put in with the consultants that were hired to perform that study, unfortunately, to kind of get what we need out of it. But so we had to sort of reallocate a bunch of our internal time to review all of those policies and provide a set of recommendations to the select board about what we can do for our staff in this budget year. Sans a done sort of salary study. And so at that same time of trying to figure out what we can do in this year and performing all the kind of budget and financial analyses about that and having some conversations with our staff in a few different kind of perspectives, we're also now getting to the point where we're just about to be having a new HR director in February who is going to begin taking that salary study that is not yet complete and sort of moving that into the second phase of what we anticipated, which is a more thorough look at our wage and compensation. And so that would include things like looking not only at other public employers for comparisons, but private employers, which for certain positions are really where it's more competitive, and doing interviews with our staff, and a much more sort of interactive and thorough process. And then that would produce a new set of recommendations 1 year later, so in the 24-25 budget process. And of course, we've been discussing the changes that we want to make in the 23-24 budget. And then, of course, the last thing that definitely demanded some focus, especially on my end, was really getting up to speed on all of our departments' budgets. And so, of course, this is my first year going through the budget in Hanover. As I've mentioned, we have a little bit of an institutional memory issue on the finance side right now. And so it has been really amazing working with our department heads because the budget submissions, by and large, that we got were really well organized, detailed, accurate numbers. I mean, our departments really know their budgets quite well. It's scary, some of them, I think the numbers kind of rattling off the top of their heads. But a lot of it was conversations with me, with department heads, asking questions, understanding their submissions, so I can make sure to try to get a little more up to speed about the 10, 15 years that they each have of the context that they're coming in when they're submitting their budget. So those were some of the things that kind of pressured us internally a little bit and kind of made us triage some of the things that we wanted to maybe change a little bit this year. And we're still going to be discussing some of those things during the budget presentations, but some of those changes now with our new finance director in place that we'll be able to talk about. And then some of those we'll make this year and some of those we'll make in future years. But it seemed worth not rushing into any of those sorts of decisions. And those might be accounting practices, how we name and organize our accounts in our system, what finance software we use, which funds are separated out into distinct enterprise funds and not. There's just a whole bunch of questions like that. Some of those we'll address this year, some of those, we'll work on over the next few years. There were a couple things like we heard a little bit about on the school budget side that were super challenging in not just our budget, but I think in most budgets right now. And these provide an important context because they inform why we want to take a little bit of a different perspective on our budget. And so there are 7 primary things that we identified as really challenging this year's budget. Most of these we're probably all going to be familiar with, maybe a couple we might not be. So of course we have record 40-year high inflation and record rising costs in a whole bunch of different areas, including fuel, raw materials, insurance, and things like that. Like they mentioned with the school, these are things that we don't really have any control over. Number 2 is record labor shortages, especially in the public sector, and especially in this region in the Upper Valley, largely due to lack of housing availability and childcare services. Number 3 is that we do have several under-budgeted program areas, and so one of those that we've identified significantly is staff compensation. The other are things like retirement accruals. So when an employee retires, if they have earned time they've collected, we don't have those budgeted in the way that we probably want to. And election expenses is one that I've mentioned before as well. And so that's salaries, but also non-salary and wage expenses for elections. Number 4 is the likelihood of significant incoming debt service for major infrastructure repairs and upgrades that will largely, if not exclusively, be borne by water and sewer ratepayers, but is still a big project and a big number that impacts our overall budget, and a need for a little bit more of a holistic capital planning as part of the budget process. Number 5 is there's a couple areas where we might be over anticipating revenue a little bit. We talked about that a couple months ago when we finalized our tax rate. Number 6, somewhat high of a fund balance utilization that we may want to discuss how we do, maybe phase out, and also the difference between the way the town identifies fund balance and the way the state identifies fund balance. The last thing is a recommendation from the trustees of the trust fund, or a preliminary recommendation of thinking about significantly reduced new spending out of the Brissette Fund, for example, due to really tight market conditions. So we'll talk about all those things a little bit more detail when we do the presentations, but I wanted to throw them out early, that those are all things that have sort of specifically challenged this year's budget a little bit. And again, they inform why we want to look at things from a slightly different perspective, which I'll get to in just a moment. But basically, the takeaway here is that there's a slightly greater existence of a structural deficit in the budget than it may have seemed. And basically what that means is just that there's more expenses than there are revenues, and that isn't a one-time occurrence, but it's something that's built in on an annual basis. More expenses than revenues. And so there's a few things in the past that have sort of netted out in our favor. So for example, the retirement accrual, so people when they retire, when we pay out the unused, paid time off, if for the last few years we've had a number of vacancies in different positions in different departments, right, and you could sort of use extra money from a vacancy in one position to pay a retirement in another position. There was a handful of things like that where we sort of benefited from things kind of being a wash in that way. A few of those things, in large part due to some of those kind of items I just ran through, we're not going to get the benefit of those in the future. So we want to make sure to kind of put those on the table and kind of talk about them this year going forward. Okay, we have a bit of an imbalance in that sense, and what can we do to address it? So there's really only a pretty finite number of strategies that are available. There's a whole bunch of kind of different very low-level tactics and stuff, which this is not really about, but there's kind of really only 5 strategies. You can cut costs or eliminate services. That's one that you can do. You can increase non-tax revenue. You could borrow money. You could raise taxes on existing taxpayers, or you can create new taxpayers. And so each of those are strategies of basically paying for something that, isn't already in the budget. And so I'll run through what each of those kind of means, and then we'll end on kind of some takeaways that might inform our tax rate and some other discussions. So eliminate services is something that we're not really in the mindset of thinking about right now. That's not the guidance we've gotten from the select board or from the community in any of the conversations, that people want us to cut costs by eliminating services that we provide. I think one of the things that makes Hanover unique is the very high level of service that people who live here, work here, go to school here get. Until we get that guidance that we want to start closing down departments or eliminating services, that's just not something we're really exploring. Cutting costs as part of that can sometimes feel very compelling. Say, okay, well, we're just going to cut 10% out of this part of the budget. But in an organization like Hanover, much of that has already been done. Those are not things that you can do every year. Those are really things you do a few times, or every once in a while, and you might be able to save a few percent here or there in a department budget if something hasn't gotten, close attention in many years. But this is not an this is an organization that is impressively and in some cases surprisingly lean in some areas. So there's not waste where we are just throwing money out the door and can say, oh, you know what, let's just stop buying employees Rolls Royce. Okay, we can just end that practice and save a bunch of money. We just don't have anything on the books that's easy to do. There's a few little things, but most of the low-hanging fruit, my predecessor, Selectboard, those things have all been addressed before, and we have a relatively efficient organization. Now, the other piece is that when you look at all of the operating expenses, the majority of that is salaries and wages. That is an area where we've already discussed tonight and previously here that we are not looking at cutting costs, but we're looking at adding money into the budget for. So we can take that off the table. So then what you're left with is non-salaries and wage costs. Most of those are either fixed costs, the fuel, insurance, things that we get billed at or billed for, or they are products or services that a few years ago even we might have been able to get competitive bids on or quotes on, but the supply chains and markets for a lot of things that we buy are just not very good right now. And anybody who's tried to find a contractor in the last few, we all sort of know it. We just don't have the upper hand, really. The consumers in a lot of these areas don't really have this sort of upper hand. So we can't, say, okay, well, we're tired of paying X amount for copiers, put an RFP out, get 5 different bids, and choose one at, a third of the cost. The markets just aren't quite that favorable to us right now. So what we're left with is really small pieces of the pie as far as cutting costs. And I identify in the memo, there are things that we can do there. So, we might upgrade our phone system. We might change to a different internet provider. We might implement a software solution that reduces the amount of paper and postage that we use. And those are all going to save money and they're going to improve services, but they're not going, taxpayers are not going to see that on their bill and say, wow, I'm so glad that we switched to this paperless process because look how much I saved. And so it's not none of those things will have that large of an impact. So that was the first of 5 different strategies, right? That was the cut cost or eliminate services. There's not a whole lot of value that we can find there. A little bit, but again, not a whole lot. So the next one was increased non-tax revenue. And so really there's 2 buckets, right? There's tax revenue, there's non-tax revenue. Non-tax revenue, of course, is all the fees, permits, parking meters, rates, anything that isn't a tax. Those are not things that we are allowed to set the amount for just because we want more money. So the state of New Hampshire does not give us that ability. And so we say, well, we want to buy, a new dais for the select board. We're going to increase parking meter, fees. We're not allowed to do that. Basically, all of those rates have to be correlated to the amount of money it costs to provide the thing. So a building permit can go up if the salaries for the people that are inspecting the buildings goes up, but the building permit fees can't go up if we want to add hours to the library. So non-tax revenue isn't really something that we can just take and play with and say, okay, we need more money. We're going to turn that dial and get more money out of it. The next is borrowing money. I think there's probably not a stakeholder in Hanover who would say, let's use our credit card to pay for things that are a structural imbalance in a budget. I imagine most folks hopefully don't treat their home finances that way, and that's certainly something that we don't want to do here, which is, that is the epitome of kicking the can down the road, right? Borrow money because there's something we can't afford right now without knowing that we can afford to pay that off. So we're just going to, put it on the credit card. So we don't want to do that. Borrowing money, of course, is very important. Sometimes it's very valuable, especially for large infrastructure projects when you need to spread the cost out over many years because there are going to be people using that hard asset for many years. So you don't want everybody in 1 year to pay for a road or to pay for a new sewer system if people are going to be using that system for decades to come. But of course, we don't want to use that strategy for paying for things that we use on a daily basis through our operating budget. That's the third strategy. The fourth strategy is raise taxes, something that we're all familiar with, just generally living in the world. And this is often, raising taxes can often be something reasonable to do because, for example, there's inflation every year, as we heard a little bit about and as I think we're all familiar with, right? And for better or for worse, not commenting on that, we live in a country where our economy is built on growth. And it's basically a sort of grow or die mentality. If you're not growing, you're stagnating. And that really is how the U.S. economy works. A small amount of inflation is, as I understand it, what our goal is from an economic standpoint. 7%, maybe too much, 0%, not enough, somewhere in the middle. And that we see that. But we really need to raise taxes, all other things being completely equal. If you're not cutting costs or services anywhere else, if you're not raising taxes along with inflation, it is possible that every year that purchasing power of your dollar is getting undercut a little bit. And that can actually add up to a lot over long periods of time. But, of course, raising taxes can also be a bit of a crutch. You could have a government that says, we want more money, so raise taxes, and we're going to just take more money in. And it doesn't really matter that it's a burden, etc. That is not obviously something that has happened here in Hanover. The select board has been very conscious and careful of how much of a burden it places on existing taxpayers. But basically, the long story short of the raised taxes strategy is that there's going to need to be some of that to pay for things that we don't currently have budgeted for, but we really can't rely only on that because it's going to be too much of a burden on existing taxpayers. So the last piece is create new taxpayers. Now, we're not lucky enough to be the federal government because if they need more money, they can just create more money. Of course, we're all going to pay the consequences of that as we are with our high inflation. But that's not something that a state or local government can do, right? So our best mechanism for having an impact on our budget is creating new taxpayers where there wasn't a taxpayer before. And so when we see growth in our grand list, which is the total assessed value of all of our properties in town every year, that growth in that number can come simply from either existing properties gaining in value or adding new taxpayers or new properties into the mix that weren't there before. So the example that I gave in the memo is if you have, these are all average, rough, approximate numbers, a disclaimer. If you have an apartment building, for example, that has 25 units in it, that will, again, approximately generate about $66,000 in tax revenue towards the town budget. If you double the number of units to 50 units, that will generate about $133,000. That additional $66,000 is largely being paid for by the rent of the 25 new units that weren't there before. They pay that rent to the landlord pays that to the town. And so we just created new taxpayers and brought more money into the budget, but we didn't necessarily burden existing taxpayers anymore. We added new people into that. So the same way that in most cases, adding someone new into an insurance pool, right? The more people in an insurance pool, if you've got a one-person insurance pool, it's going to be pretty expensive. The bigger and bigger that gets, right? The lower the risk, all other things being equal, the lower the risk and the lower everybody's going to pay. Thinking about a tax base like an insurance pool is not a bad analogy. That the more people that you add in, the more wider that you spread that burden. All of that, creating new taxpayers can be difficult if you don't have a master plan that is up to date and accurately reflects the community's values, because you could end up building in a way that is too fast or in the wrong places or doing things that will harm your community in the long run, right? It's just building out of control all over the place. But fortunately, we are just at the very end of completing a new master plan that is going to be extremely up to date. It will be the most in fact, this year, it will be the most up to date it will ever be. And that is a great outline that was an extremely thorough process of getting community feedback of, I don't know how many hundreds of hours of meetings to build all of that process. So there is tremendously good public feedback in guiding the land use and development goals of the town that are part of that master plan. So this could mean doing things like creating higher density housing on West Wheelock that might be geared more towards students. It could be allowing mixed use development in our downtown, which we currently mostly prohibit, residential above commercial. It could be turning a parking lot into covered parking with apartments above. There's a whole bunch of different things that what I'm talking about is creating a new taxpayer could look like. It could be turning a single family into a double family. This looks in a whole bunch of different ways, but it's basically intentionally bringing people in to our community, not only because we want them to be here, but because they're going to write a check every year. And there is significant work that goes into thinking about land use and planning from all of our planning-related entities, our planning and zoning office, planning board especially, and a couple of our other boards and commissions that all kind of work around land use and housing issues. But one of the things that we want to talk about this year in the budget process is integrating a little bit of that discussion and that planning process with what we're doing with the budget process. So that if we're looking at multiple years out in the budget, which we're going to be doing in February, and we say, whoa, we're seeing costs coming down the pipeline here, that we have a context and an awareness of what's happening on the planning and zoning side, so that if they were saying, well, our zoning is going to change and we're not going to allow any new construction of anything, say, ooh, this is going to be tough because we've got some cost coming down the pipeline here that we know we need to pay for. And so the only option we're left with is then raising taxes at that point instead of adding new taxpayers into the mix. And so we want the budget conversation to have the context of the planning and zoning and land use conversation. And we'd like the planning and zoning and land use conversations to have the context of the budget conversations. And what all of that sort of integration, that sort of interdisciplinary approach does is it gives myself and our staff and all of our departments a little bit of a guide about how much we want to have our foot on the gas pedal for redevelopment. Are we really pushing hard because we need to bring in new taxpayers and ratables to pay for things? Pushing a little softer, and how are we doing that, and is it in line with our community's goals? And so there are definitely some challenging aspects of our budget this year, but what I wanted to do in this memo is provide a brief, for me, overview of some of the challenges that we have. Thank you for laughing at that, Peter.
I was laughing too.
Okay. We wanted to identify what some of the challenges were, that this is a little bit of a different budget year than perhaps we've seen in the past for some of the issues that I identified. Because of that, we want to broaden and sort of zoom out a little bit and make sure that we are being very intentional with the grand list growth that we are anticipating for each year, and that is based on very specific, deliberate conversations with Dartmouth College, with private property owners, with our assessing department, with our planning department, and that we are understanding, do we need to do more, do we need to do less, are we going to be able to pay for the things in the future that we want to pay for? And so that is the sort of conceptual framing, which is basically how do we pay for things in the future that are not currently in our budget. And that's going to be one of the themes of kind of the budget this year. So I'll stop there. I can talk about any other topics or answer any questions there.
Thank you. I think we're definitely benefiting from a new set of eyes. And you just, thank you so much. I mean, that was a well done and very concise explanation of kind of where we are and what the challenges are and what we need to at least take a first step to try to do this year. But we're definitely benefiting from a new set of eyes and a new perspective and some new ideas about how to think about our budgets and how to think about growth and how to, and of course we're right in the middle of a master plan review, which is perfect, perfect timing for all of this. So I'll open this discussion to the board and then to the public to see if they have questions on what Alex just described. And it was a memo today that came out to the board and I believe to the finance group, and that'll be on the website.
That'll be on the website tomorrow, yeah.
So everyone will have access to it that wants it.
So,
China.
thank you for that kind of big picture overview, and I think that I serve on the Sustainability Master Plan Committee, and we have a long way to go before we're done. I mean, I think we're hoping that we're done in the next few months, but it's been quite an effort to get through. It's a very comprehensive plan, and so I think these are some really good things that we should be thinking about as we look at our strategies for our goals and strategies as we look particularly at the land use component of the master plan. I think I caution, having worked in this field and in this state in particular for quite a while, that growing the grand list doesn't necessarily have a net sum gain. I mean, I think that oftentimes when you grow your population, you also grow your services, and you grow your demands on your fire and police and wastewater and sewer. So I think what you're saying is, very exciting. I think we need to move forward with very carefully as we look at growing the list. So.
Others? Bill?
Yeah, just a clarification, because I've had this conversation at least 3 times in the last year. Just to clarify, Dartmouth College is the largest taxpayer by far, and they pay taxes on dorms, food service areas. Anything else?
And it's land that's not being used for academic, for
So,
education. So Dartmouth pays roughly between, I think maybe 10 to 12%. I think I'm looking at cards.
Yeah.
It's about 12% of the taxes are paid by the college.
Okay, so
Academic buildings are not,
right.
by state statute, are not taxed.
So I'll just try to frame it quickly. Concept is, we know housing's a problem, especially for Dartmouth students. There's a proposal to build new dorms, so that would be new taxable income once they are built, which is a ways out. We won't debate where it should be, but as they build those out, and then they shut another dorm down, they totally gut it and renovate it, does the college stop paying taxes on that building? Yes, right?
Yes.
Yes, so my point is that it's a multiple year event, but the total impact of even, we'll call them new dorms, is really pretty far out. To get them built and then stop gutting the other ones and then have them all filled. So I just want to make sure the public understands that, because I've had that conversation and I thought I was correct and you've confirmed that, so it's
Harvey
big.
has to. But yeah, you shut them down so there's no income, so essentially you're being, the state allows income generating, so basically the dorms are rooms and meals, if you will.
Yeah.
Those are taxed. If there's no living in there and they're, fixing the roof and changing accessibility, then they're not taxed.
Right, so any additional new revenue, looking at it from a dorm space that's built in Hanover, is multiple years out.
And if I can throw a thought in there too, I mean, it's one of the things that's come up more and more over the last, I don't know, 5 years, probably longer than that, but is when thinking about the value, and that's not really what this presentation is, because we really go down some rabbit holes here on the land use side, but there's a way that people talk about the value of a new building as a value per acre, which is something so that basically if a town thinks about, or a community thinks about its land as a finite resource, which it is, of course, that if you have and you're looking at, bringing a big department store or a big box store into your town, right? And either way, they're going to pay the same amount of taxes. I'm just going to make up numbers, but they're going to pay $500,000 a year in taxes. One proposal is that they're going to build out on rural road, and they're going to take a 20-acre parking lot and a 5-acre store and et cetera, versus if they moved into the downtown, renovated a building and didn't build any new parking. And so there's a lot of land use frameworks that I think are looking at things at the value per acre, because building way out there, it makes all those services incrementally more expensive to provide. It's further for emergency services to get to, it's further to connect out to water and sewer, all these different things, to get internet out there, all that stuff, versus building in a building where there's already a footprint, maybe there's already impervious surface, you don't need new infrastructure, the poles are all there, all that. And so there is, part of the goal is trying to think about not just, blanketly how to build in the bottom line, but how to do it in a way that maximizes the value for the community and maximizes the value from a budgetary standpoint, as far as a more efficient use of finite resources, if that makes sense. So just wanted to throw that out there.
I think this whole concept will be discussed in a strategy way with the public and by the select board relatively soon. In my own head, I kind of think of it as organic growth versus a more deliberate intent to create. I mean, Hanover has a lot of organic growth. Our grand list has increased every year. You think about just in the last, help me out here, people, in the last 5 to 10 years, South Block, Wheelock, additional dorms on campus. There's been a lot of sort of organic development within Hanover that has added to our grand list. Typically, it gives us one point plus or minus each year. So there's that happening that we enjoy, and then there's also a more focused effort to increase that amount above and beyond what would be organic growth. And that's a discussion we're going to be having.
And I think we've also seen, given this is a property tax state, we've also seen in terms of the values of our properties going kind of through the roof. And I think that's added to our grant list. So it's added, so we've had properties that were...
But not in a way that increases the amount of money we bring in. Not in a way that increases our budgets. I mean, every time our property, when we do a valuation, property values go up and the tax rate goes down. It doesn't change how much money we bring into the town on that revaluation. You add to the grand list by a renovation, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
That adds to the grand list.
Right. No, and what I'm saying is that the value of, we have seen a number of homes that have been purchased, torn down,
Absolutely,
rebuilt,
absolutely.
multi-million-dollar homes, and so
Absolutely.
we've seen an incredible increase on that front.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that's kind of the redevelopment, not necessarily what you're talking about, Alex, but that's what's happened in the past 10 years in this
That's
town.
correct. If someone buys a home and renovates it
That's it.
heavily or
Yeah.
tears it down and puts a new one up,
Yeah,
That
and I'm not,
increases our ground.
and then in terms of what we see in resale, you know, the price of housing has gone crazy.
great.
And that, of course, is the mirror image of our desire to make this a more affordable town in terms of, you mentioned, can new town employees find a place to live here?
Big problem. Finance Committee, any questions? Kim? Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Kim Hartman, School Board Representative on the Hanover Finance Committee. I just wanted to share some information, or just to let you know what information we're using in the school budgets. We also look at our tax rates, obviously, on the school side, and as part of that, we need to assume what level of growth we should expect for the FY24 budget or the next year's budget. And so we asked the director of our assessor Norm and say, what would you expect that we should put in our budget to assume next year? And so just so you know, and what we're using in our numbers is a $14 million net assessment valuation growth versus last year. So that 14 million is what we're talking about, right? So that new construction, we're not getting all reassessed properties, right? It's just kind of that growth. So we're using 14 million for the FY24 budget. And so if it significantly changes, please let us know. Thanks.
Corey?
So I
Please
already asked
introduce
this. And in some ways, because the Finance Committee has not discussed this, I guess you could say that I'm speaking on my own behalf. But I did want to dovetail on some comments that were already made by Select Board member Whitcomb, which is that we did discuss this concept maybe 15 years ago, pretty much in depth. And I think where the town came out was that they did not want to pay for a cost of service study because it was 100% certain the study was going to come back and say that the growth would not help the bottom line in terms of revenue. And we sort of went away from that saying, but there are still reasons why we want to encourage growth in certain places, and Rivercrest was approved, and and so on and so on. But I think that if this conversation revives, you're going to have a number of people say, but wait a minute, we did go through this, and that's not a reason to, that's not a strategy that's probably going to help us that much. And this is part where I do want to put on my Finance Committee hat. I already brought this up tonight, that because of the swing in Dresden, and so this makes our community very special because we're part of an interstate compact, that our school assessment is dependent upon what's happening across the river in Norwich. So if we grow and they don't, the swing continues to come to us. I mentioned already earlier that we had a $500,000 increase in our assessment based solely on the swing in enrollment. That was 20 students, grade 6 to 12. And then of course, there are some other special ed costs that is, and just costs in general. But I did a back of my memo and sort of looked at your hypothetical 50-unit building and how much it would generate for income for the town as well as for the schools. And both of those amounts are less than the $500,000. So you'd hope that in that 20-unit building that there wouldn't be very many K through 12th grade people, because it really detracts very, very rapidly, and never mind what other additional costs there are. So I just want to really urge caution in thinking that that is going to be something that helps us significantly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
obviously we're gonna have an active debate as we go
Yeah,
down the
but I
road.
think that a lot of people don't think about this, the Dresden piece of it, which we really felt in spades this year.
Okay.
And I just want to say too, I mean, I think from a stakeholder perspective, like the school district, any conversations about land use and redevelopment, whether, you know, regardless of how much our foot is or isn't on the gas, is a conversation that has to be had between the two entities. You know, that we can't do things neither entity can really do things in a vacuum. And I know I've reached out and started to have conversations with the superintendent, and you know, we're starting those conversations. But it's important to do that sort of in lockstep. And I think you see some towns, and this is not us in the past or in the future, where they're so totally separated, and basically you have both entities almost fighting over taxes. And is it going to, you know, increase students in the schools? Do we have the capacity? And that's certainly, you know, you can also have a very proactive, collaborative conversation about that too.
Okay, the tire hits the road. Our job tonight is to set a tax rate increase target for this budget. Typically, we know this is an art, not a science. We're looking in a very high inflation year. We've already had discussions and know that we need to improve, significantly improve wages within the town. And I'm going to move that we set a target rate of between 6 and 7% for this budget. I've had some preliminary discussions with Alex, and this is not a mission impossible. We don't like to do that either, but it obviously is significantly higher than the tax rates we've had in the past. But this is also, but it is not particularly out of line with inflation, as we are all experiencing it, and certainly not out of line with some of the factors in catch-up that we know we need to start doing this year as a down payment. So that's where my head is, and we've discussed this briefly in the past, but now is the night when we have to kind of make a decision. Comments? Questions?
Just to clarify, your 6 to 7% is the budget number
Tax rate number.
or tax rate number?
Tax rate number.
So
How
how do you compare that then to what should be increased in the budget? I'm forgetting the ratio.
It's about, my memory is last year, the 1% was about 105,000, something like that, 110,000, in that range. So you're looking at adding $600,000, $700,000 to the budget. Round numbers. And because there's many variables that go into here, as we all know, what we do with undesignated fund balance, what we do with this, what we do with that. But that's all driven by, once we've given a target, then it's up to management to come back with a budget that meets those criteria, oftentimes telling us what things needed to not get into the budget that they wish had. And then obviously during the budget hearings, we have an opportunity to question what is in the budget.
So that's really within the range of what the school passed. It's 6.
My memory is the school board had a 6.6% tax rate increase.
6.7.
And if you look around various communities, I think it's in line with what's going on with our neighbors as well. I don't want to go to
It's a big one.
It's a big one, it's a big number, and part of it is this judgment as to what the community can afford. And I think all of us are experiencing high, again, inflation's at 7%, 8%, and we're all experiencing it. So it's not out of line with what there are other bills that are going up. But I'm going to stop and let you all weigh in some more. I don't hear anybody coming in Harry. That's good.
No, it is a big number. I would I think slicing the pie in very small slivers. I would prefer that we not publish a 7, that we do a 6.8 or a 6. I mean, 7 to me sounds like, could create a psychological barrier in our
I think the
tax
challenge is at 6 to 7, try to come in at 6.5, no way above 7 in terms of the budget. And then we all can make decisions as to
Okay.
how to finalize that. But
Okay.
I would say 6 to 7, target of 6.5,
Yeah,
but
great.
not to exceed 7. Keep
But
yourself
I
flexible.
mean, I think we also have to be realistic. If we can't get what we need at 7, we may have to go higher.
May have to.
But I think we target, like we always do. We set a target and then you need to tell us, well, these are the things you're not gonna get if we, shoot for 6.5%.
Yeah, I was gonna say to Alex, that's what happens to us every year, and we say, we can accept these things, we'd like to add back in these items that, so we're used to that kind of negotiating.
Do you think that's feasible? We have our new finance director here, so she could probably weigh in. It's your
She's been
first
here
day, right? That's a little hot seat. We won't put you there, Ellen.
We'll put you there, Ellen.
I would say we're definitely in the ballpark. I have a very preliminary first rough draft of the budget that's been completed, that we've started to go over, that we've gone over with our finance consultants as well. So I think we're in the ballpark. There's a few numbers that we're still working on that are not super small numbers that, if the couple things all break against us, which I don't, then that's a little harder. If they all break in our favor, then much easier. And so there's just a few of those things still outstanding, but we're definitely in the ballpark with those numbers. I mean, but it's also, just the personal reflection is, as an elected or appointed official, I've never introduced a budget with this high of a tax increase before, and there's something about it that makes me not want to do that at all. And I'm obviously going to work pretty hard to try and bring it down as low as possible, but also knowing that next year's this is not the only difficult year. There's going to be so we don't want to do a 1% increase this year and then a 12%. Obviously we want, I think, consistency and stability. I've heard that discussed before a little bit as well. So yeah, the number hurts me a little bit too, just thinking about, but then you think about, the environment that we're in and some of the areas that are really high priorities. And it's, at the end of the day, it's not that unreasonable, it seems, especially if this is part of a broader strategy, which we're hoping to do, where we're going to be looking, 10 years out. How are we paying for things in the future, and make sure that we don't have to have, a hard conversation every single year. And okay, well, we got another tough year ahead of us, but that we have a plan that we can sort of walk down and hopefully, it seems like it's a growingly unpredictable world, but hopefully we can create a plan that we can sort of walk down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
We all know there's some things to still be resolved from the audit, plus whatever has happened since July 1 to last week. And we're waiting on that because that could certainly have an impact on some decisions. So do you have a sense of a timeline on when we will have we'll be comfortable based on all this review and hard work with some new folks, and that where are we? Because there's some serious numbers involved there.
Yeah, so actually our audit numbers, and this card we spoke a little bit about on Friday, we're almost, we're basically done. There's 3 things outstanding that our auditor is working on with our finance consultant. None of those have a major impact in the numbers for this year. So even though the audit isn't complete yet, I did speak with our auditors last week and got a bunch of the numbers that I need to start plugging into things so that we can, because getting all the operating expenses and revenues is one piece, but then you kind of have to place that on top of where we started from. Where we started from, I do have those numbers. They have not been delivered in the audit, but they are audited numbers and they're done. So there's only a few things outstanding. I think I gave the finance committee a schedule of a couple weeks for the audit to be done. I think that's very reasonable. I think we're going to have that completed fully in that time period. But we're now, just this week, starting to move into taking the budget, putting it on top of the numbers that are audited now, and then that builds the kind of final, the kind of final piece for this year's budget, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Public, Kari, Finance Committee, help.
So Kari Asmussen. I am of the Finance Committee again, and I have to say that, of course, this is a very different year than any other year. And I guess I'm feeling like it is very hard for me to know, based on the information which we have, which is really nothing on this, whether that is a reasonable number or not, other than that it's in line with the school, where the school budget came out, but that was a very different process. And so I'm just wondering if, like, right now you can even say sort of, well, like, we know that last year expenditures were greater than revenues, but you know, if that difference was in the general fund, that's very different than if it was in one of the enterprise funds or the parking fund, which we know has had some problems. And so we haven't ever gotten a breakdown of where the problems are. And I mean, and again, if it's in, you know, the wastewater, well, you don't have to worry about building up the tax rate to fix that, you know, that deficit. I guess in previous years, of course, we've had more information about what like a carry forward budget would be. So what is the baseline? If you did nothing else, you know, what would that increase be? And I realize that there is a lot of sensitivity this year because you're in the middle of negotiations. So I have to say, sometimes what the school district has done is set a tax rate that is based on the things that are not being negotiated, and the understanding is that that rate does not include anything that's going to be negotiated, any cost items there. And so I just have to say, I'm at a complete loss, based on the information that we have, to know whether the 6 to 7% is too low, too high, you know, or just right. I can't offer any opinion at all. And Greg is here and has a great deal of background, although he is new to our committee.
Greg Snyder from the Finance Committee of the town. My question has to do in relation to what you're talking about, Kari, in that you've said that there is a deficit that we're looking at, and determining within the time frame that we have for moving forward on resolving the budget. My question is, when will we know what the gap is? Do we know where it is? And was this something that we knew prior to the fourth quarter, or is this something just come up recently? But in order to deal with those things, do we have the right timetable in order to thoroughly address the subject?
So a couple things. So I think that the exact number I don't have, but that will be something that we'll provide when we do the budget presentations in February. Is what we're sort of looking at closing there. I mean, you can make an argument from a very pure standpoint that if you're using any undesignated fund balance at all, that there's a deficit, you know, and that's covering an amount that is in your operating budget every year. I mean, you could, if you remove that money and you were operating in a deficit, and we had something to the tune of maybe 450 or 465,000 in last year's budget for utilization of fund balance. You could make an argument that any utilization could imply a deficit. And so part of it is, well, are we going to budget at that same level this year? Are we going to budget more? Are we going to budget less? I think that's part of the question, and I don't have that exact number yet. I mean, the real important piece on my end over the last month or so has been getting every single department submitting what they need to be able to, you know, function as a department for next year. And then now that we have the audit done, taking those two pieces and sort of joining them, which is what we're doing right now. So those numbers I think are going to get fleshed out over the next couple weeks.
So you're saying we know where the deficit is?
No, I'm not saying that, no.
So, and we don't really know what the amount is?
I don't have an exact number for you tonight.
Craig, why don't you direct your questions to me? So what deficit are you referring to, please?
Well, just what was presented in the bottom of the memo.
Mm-hmm.
meaning we have more expenses than revenue deficit that's built in annually, not a one-time structural. And so this subject that you were mentioning would have an impact on the budget. And so I'm just trying to understand, do we have the timetable set up in order for us to deal with that on a timely basis? And at this point, do we have an idea of, specifically what are we talking about? Are we talking about a huge number or?
I guess, so we could see from that MS 535 that, that expenditures were $750,000 greater than the revenues that came in fiscal year 22. Now, if that is all in the general fund, that's one thing. If it's in the parking fund, if it's in the wastewater fund, that's something very different. So I'm wondering, where is the problem? Because the tax rate that you're setting really addresses the general fund and the fire fund. And perhaps while we're at it, when you say a 6 to 7% increase, are you talking about that blended tax rate that
Yes.
we've always used before?
Yes.
Or, okay, good, because sometimes, we aren't sure, so you'll know that's the blended tax rate. But again, without knowing where the deficit is, and if it's all in the general fund, that's one thing, and I do understand what Alex is saying about, the use of the undesignated fund balance, which we've discussed a lot. And, when we have talked about the one-time costs, in some ways, that's not deficit spending, although somebody could say that it is, but that was very different from where we use some undesignated fund balance for ongoing, and that truly was deficit spending. So we know some of that 700 would do that, and it's just so difficult to wrap one's arms around when, again, the 6 to 7%, it may be too low, it may be too high.
And that's what we'll determine during the budget process. I think we set a target.
Yeah.
We set a target that we think is acceptable by our taxpayers. We believe it's not mission impossible. We don't know all the answers to your question. That's all the stuff that's going to come out during the budget process. And if we're wrong, we'll have to figure it out.
So I sometimes also, the school board would be, Nancy would remember this, at this point in the discussion, they would say, and remember, these are guidelines as opposed to etched in stone. If new information becomes available that says that it's not, so would you envision that could be revised in one direction or another?
We have to, now we've set a guideline. We now see what it's going to take to hit that guideline. As new information becomes available, we adjust.
Okay.
What drives me the most is knowing that we have fallen behind in our wages for our staff. And I know that represents 60–70% of all of our costs. So we're making a down payment on that. And of course, that's in the middle of union negotiations right now.
Yes.
But what drives me the most is knowing that we have fallen behind in our wages. We know that, and we need to catch up. So I can't imagine us being able to catch up with a lower tax rate than what I've just described.
It would only be if somehow revenues, which we haven't really looked at, somehow we were hearing from the state that there was going to be something wonderful. I did want to just point out, because our town manager did mention the accrued sick leave, et cetera, when people retire, we do have something called the Termination Benefits Fund that has $95,000 in it, and it has been sitting there for over 10 years unused. And so I just want to say, this may be the year to use that fund. So, that was one little bit of good news. And I did also want to point out that I think we're all breathing a sigh of relief that the New Hampshire Retirement System handed out new rates to employers, and it's going down by 2% for both fire and police. So it's like I just feel like every little thing this year that we can avail ourselves of, that we need to do that, and
We always do. I mean, you get good news, you get bad news.
right. But we have been sitting on this fund, and with inflation, I think That might be the
Might be
time.
the
I noted that one down too, and yeah.
Might be the year.
And if for whatever it's worth, I mean, the stage,
So there it is.
okay, yeah, the stage, as far as where we're at in the, or did you want this back?
No.
Oh, okay. The stage that we're at in the budget process, I think, and I appreciate the sort of patience. Obviously, this has been, none of the timelines that we set out, right, we were able to follow this year. And, some of the deficit that we're talking about is like Peter said, we know we have, X commitment here. I know, having gone through the budget now multiple times, every cell, every account for every department, I don't have every number at this stage. We will in a few weeks, but I can tell already between things like that, between areas where I know we are underfunded. So for example, election expenses and a salary for a clerk, or the supervisor of the checklist that are at $11 an hour and doing, yeoman's work running our elections and paid at that rate. I mean, there's a number of things like that that are very clear when you go through, I think, the budget on an account level that were sort of underfunded. We talked about motor vehicle registrations and other things where we had revenues that were anticipated a little too high. And so there is that imbalance there. Over the next few weeks, when we take the audited numbers that I just got them Friday afternoon, basically when we spoke, Kari, just those numbers, connecting that to everything I have from the departments, and then that's going to produce the numbers that you're looking for, and that's just going to take a few weeks to do.
Okay, Board. Bill.
Yeah, just again, an example that I have to clarify. Last year's budget, we had the undesignated fund balance in the general fund. Every year we've used some of that for one-time charge, issues because it's been high. And that was very reasonable through all the years. Except this past year, we allocated $226,000 as a budget draw for the operating budget. So, and we put that as a placeholder, hoping that we didn't have to allocate a draw. But it was only 226 in the general fund. It wasn't $500,000. And the rest of everything was one-time items, which we do every year, and we still would have been over our goal or our range of undesignated fund. So those are things we need to clarify as we move forward, because I'm confused on how we have gone from expenses being more than revenues. Based on,
I'm not convinced we have. I'd like to see the audit.
Yeah, and I
we'll
think
just wait.
I'm not convinced we have.
So I'm just waiting
We're
to
waiting
get the
to see the
facts.
numbers.
And even though I know the form was filled out, I'm just feeling that we're missing something, or misunderstanding something, or something's in the wrong line. But I'll wait. I'll wait with my optimism to once you get the facts. That's all.
And for whatever it's worth, the amounts that it looks like from our undesignated fund balance that we have is more than we thought we had. So I think your intuitions are not off here. And so that is a number I got on Friday.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. I look forward to the facts.
Yes.
Okay, are we ready to?
Yes.
Did I make a motion? I think I made a motion.
I don't think we have to vote on this, Peter. We don't typically vote.
Well,
We
I think
typically
we
just.
need a consensus on the guideline. Is there a consensus on the 6 to 7% target of 6.5?
Yes.
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 Okay, blended rate.
Right.
Okay, you have those marching orders.
And I will be back in
Be
2
with
weeks
you.
with more information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now let's look at the timeline. Let's focus a little bit on the timeline of how we get to here at the town meeting. This is what I worry too, right? Believe me, I worry as much as you do about it. Okay, so we're here tonight on the 23rd. We're hoping to have 27, 28, and March 1 as our dates. Can you still make those?
I think so. Yes. Today was yes. We're going to be close.
Some of us are thinking of going away for a while in March, so we need to make plans. And so
Some
we've
people
been
have
waiting.
already made them.
Huh?
Some people have already made them.
Okay, is anybody in conflict for the 27, 28, and the 1st at this point?
No.
Ticket bought for Saudi Arabia, March 3.
For March 3,
Tickets for Saudi Arabia are not
and you'll be gone for a while?
10 days.
10 days, okay. I think you're gonna do the 27, 28, and the 1st, sir.
I think we'll do it.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Decision's been made for me.
Decision's
Yes.
been made.
Thank you. We
All right.
appreciate the effort.
Okay, then I guess if we hit that date, then the rest are a bit more certain.
Right.
the one that you talk about, I'm just gonna get it, you've left some time before our final, and you're coming back with our budget reviews, you're coming back with a final.
That was one thing we changed this year in the
Yep.
timeline, right, and just for the public also, is instead of trying to basically finish the budget live during the presentations, we wanted a couple weeks where we could do the budget presentations, get feedback, go back, redo the budget, and then come back. And we have March 20th as the first go around for that, and if for some reason that doesn't work, we've got March 27th as well.
Okay,
That is different, because
Yeah.
we're used to standing up on March 1 and saying,
We're done,
Yeah,
right?
We
approve.
advised that, we thought that was a
Yes.
good idea.
Yeah, I think that was something we all
We've been
agreed.
trying to,
Right.
we've been encouraging that, but we
Right.
have not been taken up on our encouragement. So
Right.
you're taking us up on our encouragement.
Yes,
we're
sir.
pleased.
Thank you. And then there's plenty of time, obviously, between the first of the month and the 20th to
Right.
get all the things set. Okay, so this is the timeline. Any questions on the timeline? No, okay. I think I'm gonna end this part of the discussion. There's one more thing we have to think about, which is whether we should or how we should or involve the social service agencies as we have in the past. My thought is that I think, given the compressed nature of this timeline, typically we've gone away from having the social service agencies present during the budget hearings, right? And I think that was a good idea. But we have given them time at a select board meeting, which is a considerable amount of time to talk to us about their services, and basically it's an opportunity for them to be in front of the public. I'm thinking that we may not have that luxury this year, given we might not want to allocate some of our precious board time to that this year, and we might want to just not. Obviously, they've submitted their budgets. We usually don't have there's usually not a lot of discussion about them. They're usually quite reasonable. So anyway, my thought is that maybe this is the year that we do not do that, as we did not do in the past couple of years during the pandemic time. So that's the thought.
May we, like to amend that thought?
Sure.
Because these folks do incredible
do
work
amazing work.
for Hanover citizens. If we're not having them here in person, which is good face time for them, I would like you to be able to take the time to say, no, Wise, and we're giving Wise X number of, dollars, and then mention, Good Neighbor Health Clinics or something, we're giving
Sure.
them, so that we talk
And
about.
I hadn't thought about this, but it also could be we could invite them in after the budget. We could invite them in later to make give them the public time that they certainly deserve. I hadn't thought about that. We could just put it after this, put it into a meeting and, later on in the season. That might be the more, these people do wonderful work for us. They do wonderful work for us.
Well, they do wonderful work, but it's critical work, and I think we do. This is I agree with you, Nancy. I think it's a good time for them, for our citizens to be able to hear and see, should they choose to watch the select board meeting, what these agencies do. And so maybe we do something in April.
I'm open to any ideas.
Yeah. But I do think, we only have one more meeting, or do we have two more meetings scheduled before budget starts?
2 more. Yeah.
We don't have a lot,
I don't know.
and so I think I would say, let's get their budgets requests. We'll debate it. If we have questions, we can reach out to them, but maybe invite them to come back here in April.
Okay.
Would like that.
Others?
Yeah, I think they do great work. We've been on board, some of their boards, so, but also, it's one more night out for them, that they feel like they have to come and do show and tell, and if it's just a process that we're gonna approve the budget, and it's very clear in their presentation, in the paper, and they don't feel a need to come, I would say, why throw the guilt on them that they have to come on a Monday night? So I just want to, but I would definitely agree that if we would like them to come, do it after February 27, 8, 1.
So maybe we should.
So it's a matter of a balance, that's
I
all.
think we need to make that decision fully tonight, but we won't do it we won't do it between now and the budget hearings.
Yeah, no, that I agree on.
And then maybe we should consult
I don't-
ask them what their preference is.
Yeah, because if they're submitting that's straightforward and all, and it's one less night for the.
Yeah, I don't view their being here as a really part of their budget presentation per se, Bill, but just as a part of our ability to thank them and give them some public. And if, again, there's another night out for them. Lord
Yeah.
knows they have plenty of nights out.
I'm very glad to thank them, if it makes sense to them.
Okay, so let's kind of postpone that decision and see what makes sense to them.
Yeah,
Okay, great, good, okay. That's the only thing I had on that. What's the next order of business here?
Appointments.
Appointments. Wow, 2 great appointments. So, who would like to do the Sustainable Hanover? Because we don't have a liaison to that, do we? Per se.
No, but
Catherine, right.
her resume was pretty impressive.
Absolutely. So, is there a motion to appoint Catherine to the Sustainable Hanover Committee?
Say her last name.
Huh?
Reiki,
Right.
Hi, Ricky.
Reiki. So moved. To,
Appoint her to Sustainable Hanover.
yes.
And then, do you want at the same time Dick Green to become a permanent
Yes, I'm
CBA
looking for
member?
Catherine's resume because it was
Oh,
absolutely stunning. I can't seem to put my hand on it right now, but I will. So Catherine's involvement with the town of Hanover. You all listening? You should all be this devoted. Her community involvement involves the planning board as an alternate planner, election official, Howe Library, nominating committee member, corporation member, Fort Sayre Alpine and Nordic Ski Program volunteer, Ray School Elementary parent volunteer, Friends of North Staunton Cancer Center Proudy event volunteer, and the Hampshire Cooperative Nursery School volunteer.
Oh,
Yeah.
she works full time.
And she works full time. So anyway, we have many wonderful people in Hanover who contribute the way she does, and it's just great. So, all those in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Thank you, Catherine. And then on the, so Dick Green's re-upping for the ZBA, is that correct?
He's going from an alternate
From an alternate to,
be a full-fledged member.
Wow,
Great man.
what, huh? All right, I love it. All those in favor of appointing Dick Green as a full appointment?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you, Dick, for your service on the ZBA. Banner. Fun banners.
I move we approve banner allocation for, it was welcoming Dartmouth alum back to campus or welcome home, and then there was the Chad Hero, superhero.
And these fit in, we know these fit
In
in. so-
October, the welcome back is in June.
Yep.
And the Chad is in the fall.
And Dartmouth Homecoming in October as well.
All those in favor?
Aye.
They are approved. We have a donation to the town of, to the Hanover Fire Department.
What are these guys here for? I don't know. Should we just here visiting?
We are.
Oh, good. Welcome. Good souls for coming. Not used to having a crowd.
I'm sorry, I missed this one.
No, I was just looking at our people who've been quiet,
Firefighters.
and I was just wondering if the firefighters were here to learn about the donation.
The
and they said
donation,
no.
oh. I'm trying to find the exact donation.
It's right here, it's
75.
75. I move we accept the wonderful donation to the Hanover Fire Department in the sum of $75.
I'll second.
From Cassandra Cummings.
Yes, thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes of December 19 and January 9. Let's do them one at a time. December 19. I have no additions or corrections.
Yeah, just the issue why that's been delayed was we didn't have the right people sitting here because both Joanna and Nancy had missed that meeting, so we need the three of us
Okay, for the
here.
19th.
So I would move to approve the minutes of December 19.
Second.
additions, corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstaining?
Abstaining?
Abstaining.
And then we now move on to the one I was not at, which is January 9th.
29.
So your motion to accept those minutes.
I moved that we approve the minutes, although I have a modification, but we need a second and then.
Okay.
I'll second.
Okay, I just want to make more clear on item number 10, page 4. When I reported out in terms of, liaison to the bike walk committee, it should read after, in the first sentence, after discussed, reducing the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, so it's clear. Just so people know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And then in the second paragraph there where it says the bike walk master plan has been reviewed by the committee and peer reviewed by the firm. But it should just be, the firm name should be GPI or.
Okay. Should give those corrections to
Yeah.
Howe. Okay, we'll hear a motion, all those, as amended.
I think we have that.
Yeah, we had a motion and we'll vote as amended. All those in favor as amended?
Aye.
I have to abstain also. Although I won't go there. Administrative report. You have 2 minutes for your administrative report.
Oh, good luck. And all right, I'm going to talk fast. Human resources and HR. Since the last report, we've had 1 employee leave and 2 begin employment. So we're going to congratulate William Brown in Public Works for many years of service to the town. We also welcome Rebecca Berger, who's joining some other seasonal rehires in the OST program at Parks and Rec, and also Lauren Cockrell to the Howe Library. So I gave a little bit of an update on the salary study earlier when we talked about the budget, so I won't go through that again. Also in the last month, I've gone to a couple different webinars and meetings with municipal managers about different hiring issues. I included a little screenshot from one of them that just shows employers from different sectors and the kind of pre-pandemic employment levels and post-pandemic employment levels. And I guess it's actually a little blurry here, but the darker line, the blue, is government, which is still 3 or 4% down. I think on this graph from it's the lowest down from out of all other industries, and so government's really struggling. I include a link in the report that was a piece I just happened to see in the Washington Post that is called "A Slow-Moving Crisis is Paralyzing States and Cities," and that is about the shortage of labor for a lot of municipal governments. We are just getting to the point where we are hiring an HR director. I don't have anything to announce publicly here tonight, but I will in the next meeting 2 weeks from now, and we will have our new HR director in place in February. So we are super excited for that, because obviously a lot of the things that we're talking about, especially wage and compensation wise, require town manager, require finance director, require HR director to all be plugged in there. So pretty excited about all of that. And especially, I know there's a handful of staff in a couple departments that, being without a finance director, being without an HR director, there's been a handful of us who've been really doing a lot the last month or two, and especially some of our HR and finance staff, but just looking forward to being back staffed where we should be there. Tax rate and budget we already talked about. I think I've missed, Peter, your 2-minute mark here. Downtown Hanover, we've been continuing to meet, actually just earlier today, met with about maybe 12 or 13 business owners and stakeholders. So we've done things like, so far business owners have created a shared Google Calendar that we're starting to spread throughout business owners in town that identifies all of the sort of main major events that happen sort of in the community, homecoming, orientation, KUA opening. There's all these different things that happen that have a pretty big impact on downtown businesses. And so we're starting to kind of propagate this Google Calendar that that they created, but is now not in one place, but is going to be shared among all businesses. And we're also in some early conversations with the college about how we might integrate students into the downtown during orientation period, which is something that used to happen, as far as I understand it, many moons ago, but has not happened in a long time. That was something that came up, and the representatives from the college that are at the meetings, we connected offline about that afterwards and said, is this something we can just get in motion right now for the fall term? So hopeful that we're going to have something in place there. And we just had another great set of conversations today. So it's really exciting just seeing all the different businesses come together and talk about all that stuff. Next is a couple updates from Sustainable Hanover. So we heard and we had some conversation in our last meeting about the Community Power Coalition and the Hanover Community Power. And so there is a pretty big group of people from Sustainable Hanover that are plugged in, that I'm coordinating a little bit with, to basically try to help with the outreach of information about all of this. And so there's going to be a lot of web information, a lot of mailing information, and they provided a little bit of an update about that as we get closer towards the launch in April. There's also a special styrofoam collection on Saturday, February 11th from 10 to noon at Public Works. Definitely worth doing. The styrofoam needs to be clean. It can't have food in it, but styrofoam is, I learned this a few years ago from actually in a town governing body meeting from a group of Girl Scout troop that had done a bunch of research and come in and was actually getting all the businesses in the community to voluntarily stop using styrofoam in takeout containers. Because even though I think most of us know it's actually bad for the environment, it's also actually really bad for people, is what I've learned. And that apparently, and I'm not an expert, but I've heard from other folks who are styrofoam, some of the problems are when there's something hot inside of it, which is my understanding is when you basically use styrofoam. So there's different chemicals that can leach out. So anyway, if you have number 6 polystyrene, you can take it to Public Works February 11th from 10 to noon. And hopefully we can phase out the use of things like that. And that is the kind of thing that we're also talking about in our downtown business meetings, because in other groups that I've participated in about that, the cost of buying the really bad environmental impact, one-time use takeout products is obviously, most of those products are cheaper if an individual business is going out and buying all that on their own. But if you get 5 businesses or 10 businesses together and now they're buying at a larger bulk, they might get a better rate and they can buy the compostable stuff at the same price that they were paying for the really crappy stuff. But now because they're all banded together, they can actually afford it. And so that's part of what we're talking about with business owners is, is there a benefit to economy of scale from purchasing, whether that's just people informally getting to know each other and going out and buying things, or there's some broader facilitation of that. But if that can move us towards using more environmentally friendly one-time use products in our downtown restaurants, that would be great. And there's also a new chair for recycling and waste reduction at Sustainable Hanover. And so that is Lynn Sheldon, and that's something, she's replacing Susan Edwards, and I'm hoping that we're going to really plug into some of that in regards to trash, food waste, and recycling this year once we get past the budget. A couple other updates is that we're going to be announcing a new website soon, so we're really excited about that. We have been plugging away on that for the last couple months. Our IT department is driving that process. Our staff have been predominantly trained on it at this point. We are updating all the department pages, moving things over that are up to date, not moving things over that are not up to date, making sure all the documents and links and everything works. It's going to be a big difference. And this is also going to roll out. We'll have more information about this in the future. We're just trying to get the website up. But this is integrated with a new recreation program at Parks and Rec that is much easier to use. So for people that are purchasing or signing up for classes, and it's also going to integrate with a new 311 system that we are working on that will allow members of the public and in the community to report issues through a mobile application. So if you see a streetlight out or a pothole or graffiti or trash on the street, something like that, you can take a picture on your phone, GPS coordinates go on a map, it goes into a system, it goes up to a work dashboard on our end, we can assign the tasks out, and it's all super nicely organized. People get updates as their issues get worked through and resolved. So the website is sort of a linchpin of a few other kind of products and services, but I'll have a little bit more, probably not in 2 weeks, but in a month. We've also been working a lot the last month or so with stakeholders at the college and advanced transit on a whole bunch of different kind of important regional transportation goals. So I don't have anything more specific at that point, but just wanted to identify that's something that we've spent a fair amount of time with, and appreciate the college and some of the other stakeholders that have come together to have some conversations about how we can improve transit access in the region, which feedback is, we get frequently that, not having night and weekend public transit access is really tough. And especially for some of the college students, but I know for myself too, when my car was in the shop, not having on-demand transit, like an Uber or Lyft type thing, is also pretty complicated. We were talking a little bit about our partnership with the city of Lebanon, with the landfill, which is really great. We're working with them on a couple other fronts as well, including we have a city employee right now who's helping out in our supplement some of our data entry in our finance office, which has been going well. And we are also in conversations with them about sharing a wastewater position down the road, which is it's a position that has a very technical requirement that just really not a lot of people have or do, and we cannot find someone to fill the position, and it's pretty important to fill. So both understanding that we're sort of in the same boat here to some degree. They do have someone, we do have a vacancy, but in the long run, what's the sort of plan here? And we're thinking about approaching this totally together instead of basically what we would do otherwise, which is try to compete over probably the one person who has that license. So excited for that and appreciate the City of Lebanon's working with us on that. Everything else, a lot of conversations with stakeholders over the last couple weeks and months, which has been interesting. Did a Rocky Talk program at Dartmouth, a Leadership New Hampshire program at Hypertherm that was really interesting, and met a bunch of different people who are all engaged kind of in different ways in their community, and it's just kind of part of the rolling process of trying to get out and get to know different community groups and individuals and kind of gather that feedback. And I think that's probably, that's it.
Okay. Selectboard reports. Joanna.
Sustainable Master Plan Committee met again on the 19th, I think it was, last week. We reviewed chapters 5, preserving our character, and chapter 3, expanding housing opportunities. We're really focused on goals and strategies. We've completed the same in our fostering inclusive economic development, as well as the chapter on health, well-being, and social justice. We are meeting, the next meeting is on February 14th, Valentine's Day. It's yet another committed committee, a group of volunteers in town. I think we're reviewing the transportation section and maybe the vibrant downtown section. I am sorry to say the materials are not up on the master plan website yet, but I did send an email to our staff to see when that will happen. So, but the meetings are here at 5 o'clock. Everyone's welcome to come and participate.
Great, thank you. A lot of work. Nancy?
I don't have anything to report other than just to put in a plug for the Sustainability Master Plans committee members' openness to community members' input. They are very gracious, and we've had some great conversations.
And you can participate via Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I have nothing to report.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Any other business, select board? There's been a...
Wait a minute, what about other business? Did anyone, there's all these people, no? No, okay.
Okay. Other business, again, is intended for items brought up by the select board to come before the meeting. It's not intended to, public comment really is the time when we invite the public to join the meeting or participate on any agenda. But other business technically is for the select board to bring up items that are not on the agenda.
Okay.
There has been a request for a non-public session to discuss items pursuant to RSA 91A 3A B C D N L.
Yeah.
What happened to E? Yes.
I forgot E.
Bill Garrity, yes?
I thought that's yes.
Nancy Carter, yes.
Joanna Whitcomb, yes.
We are non-public session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Gentlemen, I didn't mean to. Did you mean to come for public comment?